Hi, I'm John Oppermann, Executive Director of Earth Day Initiative, and I'm really excited to be joined today by Mary Robinson. She is the first female president of Ireland. She's an incredible climate activist, co-founder of Project Dandelion, and also the focus of a new documentary, Mrs. Robinson. Thank you so much for joining today.
Pleasure.
So, jumping right into this, Project Dandelion is this initiative that you have co-founded that's rooted in radical collaboration and women's leadership. How do you think the story that is told in the film, Mrs. Robinson, informs that vision for Project Dandelion? What does radical mean when it comes to leading the fight for climate justice today?
I hope the film is a bit inspiring, particularly to young people, that young people can make a difference even at an early stage. Young people can be leaders and then go on to do things because I had the opportunity, to get into the Senate early in my life and contribute that way and through law before being nominated and then in a surprise to the country, being elected president and so on. But towards the end of the film, in showing how we came together as women leaders to form Project Dandelion, that is actually a very ambitious idea to create a movement of movements. So that bottom up, there's a pressure of all of us who know we're on the cusp of a much better, safer, cheaper, healthier world. We're nearly there. And we are moving, but we're not moving fast enough for the science. So we need to move faster by knowing our power, growing our power, and making it felt by those who are making decisions so they feel empowered to take more difficult decisions and get us there. And so we talk a lot about radical in three senses: radical connection, and that's the connection the dandelion helps as a symbol, all wearing this dandelion symbol. I see it all over the place I'm at the moment, the School Forum in Oxford.
Yeah.
Radical connection, radical communication. We need to tell the story better. Earth Day is a wonderful symbol, and the original Earth Day was such a moment. But we're not telling it properly now in a way that will engage people with a sense of both urgency and possibility. And so radical communication and then radical collaboration. We must work together, learn to work together, learn to support each other, learn to affirm each other, and then we will be much more effective.
Yeah, I love that. And so Project Dandelion really centering women and having women at the center of shaping global climate policy, and that's sort of the goal. This is kind of told by your story, going from the presidency to global human rights work and showing that power that can be wielded with empathy. And how do you think that we could reimagine the solutions and the systems if we really did put women at the center of global climate policy?
I think it could make a huge difference, to be honest, because women, on the whole, that come out of the women's movement lead in a different way. And men are learning more and more to lead in this way. And it's a feminist way of leading, if I could put it that way. And it is less hierarchical, it's more listening, it's more problem solving, it's more practical, it's from the heart, it's more empathetic, and it understands that people can be affected differently by different decisions. And it kind of knows that things need to change on the ground, that they need to make a real impact on people's lives, because that's where many of us have come from, in the movement. And I think it's not top down so much as learning the experience of the bottom up and bringing that into leadership.
Yeah, and having that perspective and really the definition of empathy, empathizing with people that have different perspectives than you. And then
Yeah, I think I've said a number of times in the film, I've certainly said it a number of times every day, we don't move people with statistics and blah, blah, blah. We move them from the heart. We move them with emotion.
Yeah.
And that's why storytelling is so important.
Yeah, you stole the word out of my mouth. I was going to say that storytelling is really important. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think a lot of us recognize that, but we still get bogged down in sort of the things that resonate with us, and we sort of communicate from our perspective. But then it's being able to tell that personal story, that emotional connection, and the thing that is really going to resonate with your audience, that we have to keep reminding ourselves of how do we move this, because what people ultimately care about at the end of the day is their own lives and their own communities and their own families. And that's the story that we've got to tell, I think. But
Yes, and it also depends on whose voice is being heard.
yeah,
I think it was quite a breakthrough when we had a network of women leaders on gender and climate. One of the things they could do, because these were women ministers from different countries, women heads of agencies, and Christiana Figueres herself was part of that. Um, we were able to decide who would be in the delegation, or they were, who would be in the delegations at COPs. And when they started to include grassroots women, indigenous women, young women, those voices really made a difference around the table because they were speaking with such knowledge of the problems,
yeah,
with legitimacy and authority, if I could put it that way. So at all levels, women's leadership is important.
yeah,
And connecting women's leadership, which again is the idea of Project Dandelion, it's indigenous women, it's grassroots women, it's young people, and then it's the wider business, philanthropy, filmmakers, etc. You widen the circle then because it's a movement of movements. And
yeah.
we've largely focused on women-led, women leaders, but it's not women only by any manner of means. It's a broad church, as they say.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah. And you mentioned young people, and I'm kind of curious your perspective on that because I think people have been really blown away by the role that young people have played and the perspective that they've been able to offer in their climate movement. It's just incredible. We work with a lot of young people connected to Fridays for Future, for instance. You do as well. How do you see that just in a historical perspective of having this viewpoint of young people that I don't know if they've really been at the table in the past in the way that they are today. And I think that's incredible because obviously they're going to be the ones facing the worst effects of climate change.
I do agree with you, John. I think young climate activists learned very early on how to use social media,
Mm.
how to have large gatherings that could mean protests of 7 million people on a day, that could mean, being able to rally people very quickly as part of a movement. And many of them also have been doing they've been putting in solar panels. They've been teaching how to make yourself more resilient. They've been linking with others who are involved in entrepreneurial doing. And I'm, constantly amazed and surprised. I have just listened to a group of young women or young men and women from different countries brought together as part of a climate justice fund that's run by young people.
Mm.
And each of them spoke with such kind of depth about eco anxiety, which is a very real mental health problem now, about the barriers and the fact that exploitative green energy companies are not doing very well what they should be doing, are committing the mistakes of the former mining companies in some instances, and some of them called it a new colonialism, at its worst. And yet we need clean energy, we need the green energy, but it has to be with standards, it has to be with full consent, it has to be done, has to learn from the bad practices of the traditional mining.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And so thinking about that path forward, coming from where we are at the moment, which I think a lot of us agree we're in a very fractured world at the moment, but Project Dandelion is an example of what is meant to be a cross-generation, cross-sector, cross-border effort to sort of pave over those fractures. What have you learned about building unity in a really fragmented world and how communities can come together and networks of people can play that role to stitch together the unity that we need?
I think you've used the word fractures. I think we're tending to use the word cracks. And
Yeah.
of course, the dandelion comes through the crack.
Okay. Yeah.
Like any good weed, and we have to be good weeds.
Yeah.
Um,
Good weeds.
uh,
Yeah.
and I think it is. It's back to what I was saying. It's the connection, it's the communication, telling the story better, moving from the heart, and
Yeah.
it's the collaboration. Um, I see now among those of us who are part of Project Dandelion, we're affirming each other, we're generous and open with each other. It's just has kind of made us feel part of something bigger than ourselves.
Mhm.
And it's already, influencing how we think even. And if we can spread this far, far more, because far more of us in the world want this healthier, cleaner, safer, cheaper world
Yeah.
that's around the corner. And we know we have terrible opposition from the fossil fuel lobby, from tech bros with their desire for far more energy and water for AI without any regard for whether it be good or bad. They
Yeah.
just want to be cowboys and spend money exploring without any thought of potential consequences. And all of that is on the other side. But actually, I'm very confident that we can, if we can join the movements of movements, learn from each other, learn in particular the indigenous wisdom, learn that climate and nature are two sides of the same coin, and that we are nature,
Hmm.
and that we have to, live as part of nature and protect the whole systems that keep us together. I have a more recent climate hat. I'm a guardian of the planetary boundaries, the 9 planetary boundaries, which is the work of that great climate scientist Johann Rockström and his colleagues in the Potsdam Institute now in Germany. And he developed this some years ago, but now he's got the resources for an annual planetary health check. And we launched it, the first one last September at the UN General Assembly, and we will launch the second one this coming September. And I hope that that will become a bit like the doomsday clock in a warning sense, but that the warning will be positive. The Guardians, our job is to tell the positive, this is a human problem. All we have to do is move faster. How
Yeah.
do we move faster? We switch the money. We stop subsidizing what is harming us. We shift it to incentivizing what makes us move faster.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess for summary, the sort of takeaway message. So reflecting on, your legacy as a leader and everything that you've done in your life and the public service that you've put in, what message would you give to both world leaders but also just everyday people to carry forward this Earth Day, kind of summarizing everything we've been talking about?
Well, I think I'll borrow from another elder who has since sadly died. He was the chair of the elders just before me. He was also my boss when I was High Commissioner in the UN. And he would say quite often, and it's a nice thing because it is very inclusive of all of us, you are never too young to lead, and you are never too old to learn. So some of us need to learn more. Some of us need to know, even though I'm young, I can lead. And we'll meet in the middle.
Yeah. I love that. Well, that applies to everyone, and everyone's got a takeaway from that. Thank you so much for being here today. So everyone can check out the film Mrs. Robinson, and thank you for all of the work that you're doing.
It's not the song, not the song.
Not the song, yeah,
I can't stand the song.
not the song or the other movie. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.